Excellent, guys. Welcome. We've made it. We are on week 3 now. We're on unit 3. AP, it's almost there. If we look, we literally got 1 week until we take the exam at 1 p.m. on May the 11th. So let's get pushing to this. Let's kind of review, make sure we're getting this. We will see is that this week we're going to condense it a little bit because Thursday we're going to do the mock test number 3. And then on Friday we'll do a review in terms of how to log on, make sure you're set, everything ready to go. But as we see from the webpage today, we're going to be looking at civil liberties and civil rights. So kind of the fun stuff that people really get excited by. They really enjoy it. We also got my man over here, Will Ferrell, with us. So each day I'm going to invite a different celebrity on to help us with our knowledge acquisition because why not? And of course, I was going to start with Will Ferrell because I think he's secretly my father. I'm not sure, but he might be. So moving on, for today, we're going to do topics 3.1 to 3.16. What I do want to note here is that there is a how to write an argument essay. We put that on there, so it is a good YouTube link. I would click it, go take a look, see it. It's going to really help you in terms of your structure. But moving on. So today we're going to say, how can we make sense of all of our freedoms today, right? Especially with COVID-19. And I don't want to say we're lucky, but in terms of the AP exam, we are kind of lucky in that there's a lot of evidence we can use today and what's happening in the government, both at the federal, state, local levels. There's a ton of evidence for you to get that second piece of evidence to put it in there. So let's roll with it and let's take a look. And again, we're going to do 3.1 to 3.6. Going to start on page number 80, and it is civil liberties and civil rights. So the stuff that I find the most enjoyable because it's the most open-ended, why do we have it, stuff like that. If we look at our glance today, we're going to do the Bill of Rights, a few of the amendments, and then we'll continue on down as we go through it, okay? So we'll show a few examples, but it's more looking over it to kind of see where we're at with it. So as we go down, let's get started here. Again, I do want to remind you, please go to the link on the webpage and watch Carrie LaManna's videos. 5 minutes, most of them on average. Some go up to 7 or 8 minutes, but if you just watch those videos, plus you do the review we're doing now and your own stuff, I'm telling you, you'll get a 5 on the exam. No questions asked on that one. But please do watch. Videos are good. The link is set for you there. All Unit 3 stuff is ready to go, and he does explain things very, very well. So let's get rolling. The Bill of Rights. So the first one here, our enduring understanding. So we're going to know that provisions of the U.S. Constitution's Bill of Rights are continually being interpreted to balance the power of government and the civil liberties of individuals. So I think what's key there to understand on that one is that the continually being interpreted. So the Bill of Rights is not a document that's frozen in time, right? It's very much allegorical, and in that sense, it's modernizing with the time. It's open for our interpretations of it in that one. So you do need to know it's a living document that is constantly changing in terms of its understanding of what it might be representing, even though we do have ideas and objectives that the framers set out. We're different people, and things change, but how do we keep the core essence of those rights is really what we're looking at. I'll explain how the U.S. Constitution protects individual liberties and rights, so we automatically know Constitution is where we're going to go. And if you don't know the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. And if we go here, we will look, thanks in large part to the Bill of Rights Institute, which you should definitely take a look at. It's a wonderful webpage, has a ton of resources if you're looking for evidence. When you come time to studying for your essay, really, really good source for that. But we'll look at the 10 here we're going to go through. So the first one, as we just see, we're going to talk about these, a few of them individually, but these are kind of the big ones that you need to know. Unfortunately, all the other amendments kind of get shafted a little bit until you get to like 15, some other cool ones. But for the most part, Bill of Rights is the first 10 that people tend to look at and think everything for in that one. So that's relatively easy. It's not a difficult one. I think the big stuff kind of gets here at this point. So the first one is the First Amendment, the freedom of religion is what we're going to look at in this one. First Amendment, freedom of speech. First Amendment, freedom of press. Okay, I'm trying to think, what order do I want to go in with this? Let's just start. I'm fine with doing it like this. So we're going to look at the First Amendment is your right. So let's go over and just quickly look at it here. Congress shall make, and let's actually zoom it in for us there. There we go. That should help everyone a bit. Nice, there we go. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Wow, that's a lot. Okay, let's roll with it then. Let's see. The first one, let's actually talk about, like it said, let's talk about religion here. So very interesting. it is your right, to express yourself religiously. It is also your right to not have religion jammed down your throat. So we do know that whole separation of church and state clause that we kind of abide by, where we want to keep them separate. We do want them to exist. You could make the argument that, our founding fathers were primarily religious or had religious epitones in what they did, but at its core, religion and state are supposed to be separate at that point. But in order to really participate, how do we go? I like this one. What is religious freedom exactly? Okay, thanks to the ACLU for looking at this for us. The First Amendment says that everyone in the United States has the right to practice his or her own religion or no religion at all. And I think that second one is the one you really want to look into and investigate a bit more, because everyone tends to focus on the first part, meaning, you can be a Mormon, you could be a Hindu, you can be an Episcopalian, you can be whatever you want religion. But we never look at that section option where, but I don't even have to have religion at all, where it comes with, no prayer in schools, no reading the Bible in public schools, things like that, because one of your options in the freedom of religion is the fact that you don't have to have a religion, and that's okay in that one. So that's a point you would want to know. I would go to the website here. Again, the Bill of Rights Institute has a lot of really good stuff here. We are looking at ACLU site. Does have some pretty decent stuff here, but Bill of Rights Institute has a lot of good evidence for you. So how do you know the government is establishing religion? So 1971, Supreme Court decided Lemon versus Kurtzman created 3 tests for determining whether a particular government act or policy unconstitutionally promotes religion. And the Lemon test says that in order to be constitutional, a policy must have a non-religious purpose. 1, 2, not end up promoting or favoring any set of religious beliefs. Number 2 is a tricky one. That's a big one. And 3, not overly involve the government with religion. So this is a good one. I'm not always big on jamming the Supreme Court cases down your throat in terms of evidence, because I do think there's a lot out there you can choose from. However, the 1971, the Lemon test, is a really good piece of evidence to know, because it does give that criteria to decide, is what the government is doing a more religious, right? Because they're really supposed to be impartial. So yes, we can say in God we trust, but the whole point is, we aren't supposed to jam that down people's throat. It's your choice. That's your freedom under the First Amendment, and so forth in that one. I do like, you could really take up constitutional debate, whether it's allowed to be taught in public schools or not, because is religion a historical study or is it a religious study? What it is. But I think that's where you might want to be able to hit those points in that one. So that's it for freedom of religion. Big one, though, by the way. Freedom of speech. You can also see the people behind me here. Don't know them, though. I wasn't there this weekend. Don't worry, I was staying at my home, abiding by Governor Newsom's stay-at-home orders, but these people weren't, clearly. So freedom of speech, though. Provisions here, we're looking at the extent to which Supreme Court interpretations of the First and Second Amendments reflect a commitment to individual liberty. So I think that's the whole point looking at this, is that, freedom of speech, whether you agree with it or not, it's protecting your individual liberty. So if you really think COVID-19 is a lie, it's your right in that one to do what you want in that. I know it may be frustrating, because you're going to then come back with it and say, but what happens if it infringes upon my rights to not think COVID is a lie and act about it? Again, it's the whole clause of protecting individual liberty that really matters more than anything. And as we go forth, we look down here, efforts to balance social order and individual freedom are reflected in interpretations of the First Amendment, so time, place, manner, regulations. The big clause here, defamatory, offensive, and obscene statements and gestures. So that's really kind of where people, when they ask, what is free speech, when does it switch to hate speech, all that stuff, it really is going to come down to the offensiveness. And even offensiveness, though, can be a little ambiguous in terms of what maybe offended someone might not offend other people. So I think that's a tough one there. And then defamatory, defamation, obscene statements, what is an obscene statement to some people may not be the other. So I think that's the point of it, is that, it's not just so white and black. There's a lot of gray area in terms of what adds up, which is why freedom of speech gets cited so much. But ultimately, though, it's the individual liberty protection that we're really after in that one. And if we go look at a few things, so why is freedom of speech important? When, if ever, can it be limited? That's a great question. I think we just hit upon it in our questioning right there at that point, is that, some person's hate speech may be some person's freedom speech, in that sense. So, at what point does it cross? It'd be so much easier if freedom of speech had a rubric or a metric to where we could just see, like, yep, that's it, that's not. Reality is, though, there isn't, because, again, it goes back to that clause of individual liberty and the protection of it, that matters the most in that one. I do read this quickly, though. It does say one of the founding principles of the United States and Americans cherish is the freedom, enshrined in the Constitution, grants all Americans the liberty to criticize the government and speak their minds without fear of being censored or persecuted. So hence, you have the individuals behind us here who it is your right to protest, even though we have our state leader, Governor Newsom, locking down for the most part stay-at-home orders. Let's not conjugate. Let's not go out and do this stuff. People still have their freedom to express, and as long as they do it in a safe manner, technically, freedom of speech does protect them under that. So those are always things that we really want to look at. There are different cases you can definitely cite. So Schneck versus the United States and the whole clause about clear and present danger. So that's really the hate speech where it comes out that if the speech you're saying turns into more of a motive that it is a danger, then that becomes no longer part of free speech. But those are things you'd want to look at that point and see that. Again, I think it's the one that's cited the most, probably freedom of speech, and most people don't understand the point behind it. And again, the whole point behind it is the commitment to individual liberty. So you would want to cite that and want to articulate that article as much as you can going through with it. 3.4, so freedom of the press. I think this one now today, if you're really looking at it in terms of evidence-based support, probably is where you'd want to beef up the most, because we have a press today that is stronger than it probably ever has been, not in terms of, or not just in terms of how we reach out to people, but in terms of what we say, right, and how long it's there, the content absorption, everything. So really the press is running a big show today at the point. I always call them the fifth branch of government. No one likes to agree with that, but they're pretty powerful. So if we go through this, here we go. So how are we going to roll with this one? How do I really want to say this? I'm trying to give you guys the most bang for your buck in it. And I want you to really get at that point. Freedom of the press, so let's just go look at Bill of Rights Institute here. A few different cases that we could look at here. I think I think a lot of them are really good. I do like New York Times versus United States, 1971. The claimed threat to national security was not justification for prior restraint on publication of classified documents, aka the Pentagon Papers about the Vietnam War. So if you have heard of like WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, stuff like that, they will often cite freedom of the press as their reason to show things that are classified. Presidents will come back and say, for the public good, we can't. But the whole point is that it's your right to know, and it's your right to have access to the government up to a certain level at that point. So I always find that to be an interesting one that, in times of war, Pentagon Papers were deemed okay to be showed. I would go through these. By no means is this the only list, because I actually think there's a lot more cases today and evidentiary support that you could use for freedom of press that I would use if I was taking the test. For example, you could even use, freedom of press, how that extends into social media, right? How has that changed the landscape of the federal government? I actually think that'd be a really good one to explore. But again, I'm not taking the test, so. Continuing on, the topic that everyone likes to say, especially now, even more so. I think you have freedom of press and right to bear arms, Second Amendment. It is a big one now. So Supreme Court's decision on the Second Amendment rests upon its constitutional interpretation of individual liberty. So again, ladies and gentlemen, I think what this helps us see is that it is not the point of the gun in the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. The real point is the step before that in the individual liberty that the Constitution gives you, the citizen, you, the American, right? So if you look at that, you kind of flip the script. Now it's about the liberty. It's not about the gun itself, right? The way I always try to teach people and try to look at is if you replace the Second Amendment right to bear ninja stars, it would still be the same thing in that it's your capacity to individually protect yourself and ultimately to protect your right to liberty in that one. This is a tough one to show evidence for on this one because, you've seen the people walking around lately with, assault rifles at government meetings, standing outside, and it technically is your right to bear arms. And now, obviously, some states have a little more leeway than other states. We know that. Texas being a wonderful case for it versus California open carry is very different. But it's your individual right is what it's asking you. But I think everyone gets tripped up in that they're focusing on the gun so much when I think we need to take the step back and focus on the individual liberty, and then the gun is part of that individual liberty. So maybe in the future sometime if you were to change, what the gun does, maybe there's something in the future that does what a gun does, but a lot, I guess, Yeah, how would I say that? That's a tough one, actually. I was trying to say, like, in the future, if there's a weapon you could use that's a lot more messy that protects your individual right, but that'd be horrible. So I don't know. I think this one's actually. I mean, it's even got me stumped a little bit in terms of how I would defend on this one right to bear arm in terms of focusing on the gun, because again, it's focused on the individual liberty that matters the most on it at that one. Um, 3.6, so balancing individual freedom with public order and safety. So I think this, honestly, this is probably the most boring for most people, but yet for me, it's the most exciting because as someone who studied counterterrorism so much and intelligence, there is the balance. People ask, well, I don't want to give my government information about myself, but I mean, if you're not doing anything bad, why not? And it helps weed out. So I think there is this balance that you do have to know between what is freedom and what should we be taking back to emphasize the public order and safety. Great one you could pick up if you wanted to, the Patriot Act. You could even look at stuff in the 9/11 Commission report to kind of show evidence about why you know the public good, because around that time, it was very easy to pass the Patriot Act. Very easy to pass things that kind of, I'm not going to say limited your freedom, but definitely put your limiting of freedom in question a little bit, right? In terms of wiretapping, whatnot. Just certain measures that we were okay with as a populace in times of need. And then, of course, as soon as that need goes less and less, then all of a sudden people are up and roar about it. But it's really looking at that. Even like right now, you could cite COVID-19 as a wonderful one if you've seen the stuff about tracking of COVID-19 and maybe, hey, we are all getting tested, and if you test positive, you get a bracelet. If not, something like that. So, but what point is that an infringement on your freedom versus the public order and safety? So I really think you would want to look at that balance that kind of ticks it between the case there. Court decisions define cruel and unusual punishment involve interpretation of the 8th Amendment and its application to state death penalty statutes. Okay, that's when we can review quickly the debate about the 2nd and 4th Amendment involves concerns about public safety and whether or not the government regulation, firearms or collection of digital metadata promotes or interferes with public safety and individual rights. So again, it's whether or not it interferes with it. So that tells me, in essence, then, since the interference word is there, that means the priority is on individual rights and public safety. And last time I checked, I don't know if those go hand in hand. I don't know if those marry very well, because one person who wants their individual rights to do what they want may offend another person and may jeopardize their public safety. For example, people have always cited that with right to bear arms, you can have your gun in open public in certain states, but does that put the public at greater risk of being shot? People have argued many times because now you have access to it. It's not where like, hey, I want to shoot someone, I got to go to my house, get it. No, I have it there ready to go. So it's that argument that I don't think they always go well together if you just look at it at its core. So that's why it's that balance thing, that what is okay with that. If you have complete freedom, 100% across the board, then you'll have absolutely no public safety, right? Because everyone's doing their own thing. Where if you have 100% draconian public safety, everyone's safe, you also are micromanaging everyone and no one has any rights or freedoms. So I think it's that imbalance that you got to find there when you are arguing things at that point. I believe that is it for today. Yeah, that was it for today. Awesome. I was able to knock that out in less than 15 minutes. That was really good. For the most part, though, again, if I can really reemphasize, we're going back here. We're looking at these 10 amendments and why there are whole websites, why there are whole, God, you name it, institutions named after the Bill of Rights, is because these are your 10 real big rights that help you preserve your individual liberty. And I can't stress that enough. I've said that probably 15 times now. But if I can leave you with something, it's the fact that individual liberties matter. And that's what sets Americans different. And that's where that whole patriotic experience genre comes from, in the fact that we are all prioritizing our individual liberty. And yes, we will have to sacrifice in order to meet public safety needs at times and demands. But reality is, it's on you, the individual, and that's what separates us, and that's what the Constitution is really trying to bring about. That's what the Supreme Court is trying to interpret, to see, how does that change? How has it changed from 1791 to 2020, right? Many people will argue that, hey, the Second Amendment was really written for militia. It was written for times when we had the redcoats going door to door. We needed to protect ourselves so we could make sure that we were safe. Nowadays, last time I checked, we don't have people invading us with their weaponry. going door to door. So maybe it was something that was made during that time and it was never meant to carry on. But that's the point, is that the Bill of Rights needs to be interpreted and it needs to be morphed for the time that it is in. Okay. That was a very long one. It won't be that long the next couple days because this was kind of a big topic if we're going through it. If we go back and look at 3.1 through 3.7, it is a lot of stuff, but this is kind of the bulk of where you want to go with things, is that these are the iconic things that people think of when they go with it. Look for research, and again, I would definitely suggest the Bill of Rights Institute as a wonderful source for evidence. It's a great thing you can cite to on that one. Pretty good, but it's just a very good vetted page that really dedicates the Bill of Rights, and it's very nonpartisan as well. It's pretty good in terms of what I've seen. It rarely makes a claim for one or the other. It definitely gives you both sides and lets you decide at that point. Good luck. If you need anything, let me know, but I will see you guys tomorrow for the second part of Unit 3. All right, guys.